Great. Thank you so much for coming. I am Kristen Radke. I'm the art director of The Believer magazine, where I also edit the comics section. I also write and draw comics for Pantheon. We are here with Josh Baer, Fran Meneses, Julia Rothman, and Andrea Sarumi. I had the pleasure of working with Andrea for The Believer last year, so check out her comic on our website. I would love it if you guys could all sort of introduce your work to us and talk to everyone a little bit about the work you do and sort of how you found your way here.
I guess I'll start. I'm Josh. Hi. I have several different, most of my focus is on comics. I call them comics instead of graphic novels for the most part. I have a new graphic novel, so I guess I don't always do that, coming out from Tinto Books soon. And my stuff is kind of, I call it
that's Brad, I think.
It's going to say, it's just never.
Is it? Okay. Oh, I'll be quiet until mine comes up. My main focus is biographical fiction, and I just finished my longest comic. But I also have a background running anthologies and being a writer with other artists, and that's the upshot of it.
Do you mind if I?
Yeah.
Hi, folks. I'm Andrea Sarumi. I'm a cartoonist, an illustrator, and author, and right now I do full-time children's books. I make picture books, and I illustrate chapter books and middle grade and stuff for kids. And then I also make my own comics for myself and for The Believer sometimes. And before that, I was like tabling at Mocha, like making comics, working full-time, part-time, got an MFA at some point. So my background is comics and children's books.
Hey, I'm Julia. I am an illustrator mostly, so I draw for magazines and newspapers. And then I also do surface design, which means like wallpaper, fabric, products. And I also do books, so I've done kids' books and books for adults. And I also run something called Women Who Draw, and I hope some of you are on there.
Nice. Hi, guys. Is that the proper distance? Yeah. My name is Fran. I'm also an illustrator, and I think I've been all over the place. I've worked with magazines and editorial in the past, but 2 years ago I decided to focus 100% on my shop and the things that I sell there, so stationery, paper goods in general. I'm also right now working on a sci-fi graphic novel, focusing on t-shirts as well, and that's pretty much it. Yeah.
So since this is about professional development, I feel like we should cut straight to money and talk about that. How do you all juggle the demands of work that pays bills and the creative work that you feel driven to make? Is there often overlap in those things? Can you just sort of talk about that dichotomy?
Who wants to talk?
I could start. Hi. I feel like I should preface everything about what I'm going to say on a panel about professionalism and work-life balance by saying, like, I have these questions too, and I don't necessarily know. Like, I am figuring that out, and from what I've heard from talking to other professionals, everyone's kind of also figuring it out in different ways all the time. Like, before they get published, after they get published, they have different questions. So I know nothing. Hi, guys. I freak out too. It's hard. So I'm doing kids' books full-time. And I want to be doing that, and I enjoy doing that, and I am fortunate enough to be doing that. A lot of what you're going to see, I think, here I supplied are pictures of my comics because I want to show more about my sketchbook. So that's one way that I can do stuff for myself, but most of my time, because I have to make the money, is through the kids' book stuff. So I'm lucky in that what I'm doing professionally is creatively fulfilling as well and of great interest to me. But I struggle with making time to have fun and like in art with sketchbooks and play, which I know is really, really important and I should be doing it. I always feel like I should be doing something. Do you guys feel that way? Yeah. Yeah, like, oh, I should be sketchbooking more. I need to wake up at 5 in the morning, and it's just not going to happen, you know? So there's been great freedom in doing this full time for 3 years of just knowing more how I work and how I don't. And accepting like, okay, it would be amazing if I woke up at 5 in the morning all the time and I could like hammer out sketchbook stuff, but maybe that's just not what I'm going to do. So I'm still figuring it out, I guess. But there's no answer, and so someone else should talk.
I don't want to jinx it, but I'm in a place where things are pretty steady for me. I've been teaching like really obsessively for about 11 years, since January 2008, and that's just seemed to snowball. And I was thinking the other day, like I'm at that weird point with work where when I have an off day, I feel really what's that word when you're like, you know, you wake up early and you think you need to be somewhere. I have like 1 day off per week. And so it seems like a lot. One teaching opportunity turned into another and turned into another. And before that, I just spent like lots and lots of years where I feel like I had too much leisure time. So after I kind of sunk my teeth into teaching, which kind of surprised me, initially it surprised me that anybody entrusted me with a class. Somehow that turned into more opportunities, and people are like, "You're good at this," and I'm like, "Oh, I believe you. Okay, I'm good at this." And it's really strange. The way my teaching ended up evolving was I had an opportunity. I heard from another artist that they were looking to set up a private class. And I saw on Facebook the way they did it. They were like, said, "I'm setting up a class. Anybody wants to come can come. It's going to be $25 per person, and I will teach you." And I found that if I wanted to do that as well, teaching on the side, like through private classes, it sounded like a really good, potentially lucrative, beneficial way to kind of take control over the thing that's, this thing that I was doing for other people. And I kind of feel like if I told somebody else how to do that, I would warn them. I feel like everybody's going to run away if you say, "Hey, I want you to join this class that I'm trying to do." But then I ended up slipping into it, where somebody asked me if I would teach their friend. And then I sat down with them, and they said, "I want to take your class, but it doesn't work for me." And I said, "Well, I could teach you, but you can't really afford to have me as an individual teacher. So I'll ask some people from my class if they want to come and continue to work with me, and that way I can just charge you X amount of money, and everybody's happy." So when I came to the rest of the class, I was like, I told them, "Hey, I'm trying to help somebody, and they need me to teach them, but we need other people to kind of make it worth everybody's time." And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure, cool." So that ended up, I didn't mean it as a sort of a strategy, but it ended up that way. So I've been really lucky that everything I've done has ended up creating a lot of unexpected opportunities. And the private classes I do, I mean, I couldn't ask for a better job. I can design the curriculum. I don't have anybody hanging over me. I love my students. I feel really lucky to be making any kind of money with anything related to art. And that's it. I could go on for a long time. Let's let somebody else talk.
I think that when you say you've been really lucky, I think people shouldn't say that, because I think probably you worked really hard to get where you are. And I think that it takes a really long time, and you don't realize, you get out of school and you're like, this is never going to happen. And it doesn't happen for a really long time until you build yourself up, and it's slow. And in the beginning, you take anything you can get and you try to make as much money as you can. And then over time, you start getting more and more stuff, and more things come. And you get there, and you get to a point where you are making money and you're doing well. And like, I got there, and it took 10 years, but now it's like, I make a lot of money, and I am working for magazines, and I've done a bunch of books, and what's amazing is getting royalty checks. So it's work you've done, like a wallpaper, a design that you've done, and you sold, you licensed it to a company, and you're just making money off of it, like a book. So, it's like passive income. So there's like it took me a very, very long time, but it happens, and you have to keep going and like pushing yourself. And developing, I think the question was, it wasn't even how to make money, it was how do you balance making art for yourself and making money? You're not gonna make good work unless you do your sketchbook and make work for yourself. It's just not gonna happen. So you have to always be developing yourself. Like I go to figure drawing, I meet with other people and I draw with them for fun to learn from them. I don't take classes, but I wish I did. Teaching, I teach, and I feel like I learned so much from those students. So all of those things like help you develop. You have to like try to do everything at the same time. And also like put eggs in many baskets. So, not just, if you're a comic artist, not just do comics. Try to like also do illustrations for newspapers. And also try to, teach a workshop or just try to do a lot of things.
I would say, though, that I'm still lucky because I know so many people who work hard and they still don't have the opportunities. So it's a combination.
Yes, it's a combination of like talent, like this much, determination, and like confidence is like this much. Yeah. It's like there's so many talented people out there, but if you don't have the drive and you don't care and you don't push and you don't share your work because you're like worried about, it's not good enough. I'm afraid, like I don't want people to see it yet. I'm not ready. Like just post it, just share as much as you can and be confident, and that's how people will believe in you.
Hi. Okay. So the past, I think, right now I'm making money on Patreon, which is like the crowdfunding website, and my shop, my online shop. And I always have the excuse that, oh no, I don't have time to have like personal projects and stuff like that. So what I do is like set the time and make the time to make art for myself. And what I found that is really useful is to, for example, have monthly challenges or stuff like that. A couple of years ago, I started taking January to do like a 30-day challenge, for example, because I noticed that people usually are very sad in January because nothing happens in January. So, for example, last year, January, I painted one T-shirt a day for 1 month. And it was nice because I really wanted to get better at T-shirt design. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity. So unless you put yourself and make the time to create art, it's very hard for us, like as adults, to have actually the time to create art. But what you said is exactly like go to museums and, or for example, I always make a list of the things that I feel I'm doing wrong or I need to improve. So it's nice to keep track of, okay, I need now, for example, to work on background design because I suck at drawing backgrounds. So when you have sort of like a goal in mind, things you need to improve, it's easier to approach that. I think that's make the time to make art and it will happen.
Let's move backwards a little bit towards earlier in your careers, sort of origin stories. I'm curious if there was, you talked about how you keep working, and then more opportunities come your way. Was there a moment for any of you where your work felt clarified or where you felt like you were suddenly on a path that you weren't on before? Like, was there that aha moment for you, or was it just kind of like a slow build?
I was thinking on the way, this week while we were gearing up towards this talk about how often I worked without really being there, and I feel like I have a lot to say. So there's a lot of work that I did that I wished looked differently at the time, but. Like you said, it's a form of confidence. It's a form of making a decision that you're going to push yourself out there. And there's all kinds of little ways that my work has gone cinched project by project. I've been I think Raymond Pettibone was one of my mentors, and one of the first really inspiring things he said to me was that making work is transformative. So when I was doing my first long form comic, I said, when I get to the end of this, there's a lot of things I didn't like and I didn't have control over what I was doing, but I said I'm going to be a different artist at the end of it. And every project has kind of has clicked the needle. Thank you. I was like, the clock? I'm like, what kind of measurement? It's clicked the needle forward a bit. For example, my last project that there's been some work excerpts of here from. Well, my lettering, I always kind of cut myself a lot of slack. I wanted to letter like George Harriman because his stuff is easy enough to read, but there's a lot of times when the letters crash into each other. There's a lot of places where it's wobbly. It almost looks like he's writing a letter to somebody quickly rather than he's doing comic lettering, but it's still comic lettering. So I gave myself that out. Just like when I saw that Jeffrey Brown wouldn't rule out his panels, I was like, yes, good. I can still be legit and do these things. Now, finally though, my new project, I'm actually doing tight lettering, and that is kind of an example of how my things I do for money, the teaching actually ends up serving me. I was teaching my class at I was teaching my creative writing class at Parsons, and I was just upping the ante a little bit, trying to show them how to really letter. And somehow, it being the 100th time I've taught lettering, it made me say to myself, I'm going to actually make real lettering as well. So my new lettering is on a really tight grid, the same way that Art Spiegelman's stuff was on a really tight grid in Mouse. And that process, I've been kind of dragging my lack of skills around as I've been going forward, and those skills have been blossoming into something that is more informed, and that process continues.
So I'm of two minds. If I look back at my life and think about the path I took to get where I am right now, it looks like a path, like a coherent path, like clearly, like from age, like as someone who loved picture books and comics, both growing up and always really wanted to tell stories, and studied English in college because I really wanted to learn about stories and found ways to study illustration, and worked in publishing because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated, but I know I wanted to be published, so why not learn the other side of it? So like, if I look back at me from like 5, 18, 25 on, like, it's just so freaking clear that it's hilarious to me, because when I was actually in those moments, like after graduating from college, during my day job when I was 23, and then also in 28, and before going to grad school and after grad school, and all those steps in between, it never felt like a coherent path. And maybe you guys have felt this too, where like, like the hard work that you're talking about, that absolutely has always been there. Like, I've always been doing those kinds of goals and those kinds of ways forward, which is a combination of genuine love for the work that I do and the interest that I have, stubbornness, kind of like honey badgering through life, just like, I really care about this and I'm going to make it happen, and like, screw you, I'm going to push forward. But so like, what I did is one story, how it felt and what I thought at the time is a completely different story. And then that was more confused, right? Like, how am I living? How am I making my money? How do I deal with being a freelancer full time? Now I have to learn how to do taxes, and I'm going to try editorial, and that's not working out for me, and I'm going to do a storyboard, and how does that work, and how do I... So actually, right before, a big turning point for me was when I was just really, really stressed out, working like 7 days a week, doing a part-time job, coming home, doing a lot of editorial, like just trying to make things work, and just being tired all the time and feeling guilty also, because that's also a lot of fun work to do for no reason. And I realized several things. Like I had a good group of friends, a good group of people, which I can't recommend enough to have around you. Like core people who can tell you truth, and you can hear that, and you can turn that back around to them. That's really important. And I had a friend, Kenan Rubenstein, who's a cartoonist, who he saw me like struggling to do storyboarding and was like, oh, maybe I should figure out how to do storyboarding because that could be a way to like cut back on things. And he was like, what do you actually want to do? I was like, well, kids' books. I want to make books. I've always wanted to make books. This is, again, that long path. It was like, make kids' books. And I've just been really afraid to do the one thing that I really wanted to do hardcore, because what if I couldn't do it? You know, it's terrifying. And at the same time, I'd also been talking with an agent for years after I graduated, and getting that kind of clarity and permission to like do the thing that I cared about, even if it wasn't clear where it was going, was hugely clarifying and important. And when you're working on something that you're good at and like is a natural fit for you, it shows in the work that you're doing. And even if it's not like a job yet or a thing yet, like that is like you never have enough time to do anything. So like, why not do the thing that you actually matters to you to do? So I did that. And then I also took a look at my life, because I kept beating myself up. It's like, I'm tired all the time. I broke all the time. I'm borrowing money from my boyfriend. Like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm living in New York City. Like, I've been in New York for 9 years at that point. I worked in publishing, which is based in New York. I went to grad school, which was excellent. I was in New York. Like, I'm so grateful. I'm from New York. Like, I'm grateful for the city that I was in. But my boyfriend and I looked at our lives and we're like, we just don't have time to live the way that we want to. Like, what are the structural things that are influencing our experience right now beyond just my own work drive and my own will or my own like opportunities? And is that like rent? Is that experience of like, you know, opportunities or like seeing other people or, you know, time that you have to yourself? So sometimes it's, you know, how much time you can set aside in the day and your discipline. And a lot of the times it's money and time and like everything that's influencing that. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, you mentioned aha moments, I guess, and I can think of many because there have been a lot over the course of being like, I did it, like, or like, whoa, it happened, or whatever. Setting little goals and then getting them. But I do have one big one where I had this idea for a book. This is the first book I ever did. And it was to get a whole bunch of artists to play an exquisite corpse game together, a modified version of the game where they could like continue the horizon line and make a thing based on another thing. And it was going to be this, I had this whole idea. And somehow or another, I scored like a meeting. I was going to San Francisco and I like got a meeting with an editor there at Chronicle Books. And I was so excited. And I thought I'm going to go have this lunch with this editor. And I got to the office and this woman took me around and was showing me all the desks of all the people that work there. And was like, this is blah, 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 and introducing me to all the people. And as she introduced me to all the people, she'd say, okay, see you in the boardroom in 5 minutes. And then she would bring me the next sale and be like, see you in the boardroom in 5 minutes. I see you in the boardroom in 5 minutes. To all these like art directors and all the people working there. And I was like, I wonder what's going on in the boardroom in 5 minutes. And she's like, so you have your presentation ready for the boardroom, right? And I was like, oh man, like I thought this was just like me and this editor meeting for lunch and I was gonna tell her my like really cool idea for this book. And meanwhile, I go into this room and it's like a boardroom. Like there's like a long table and like all these people like with their beautiful stationery products, like sitting down, like ready to take notes. And I'm supposed to like, and I was like, I don't actually have anything. And I was like, okay, this is like it. This, you got this, like you're here. You have to figure this out. Like, so I sat down and I said, well, you know, thank you guys all for being here. Like I have a great idea. I am so excited. I'm going to do this book. I really want you to be the publisher. It's going to be 100 artists. It's going to be based on the exquisite corpse. It's going to be this fold-out book. I really want it to be an accordion. It's going to have David Shrigley in it. It's going to have like Chris Ware. I just like named a whole bunch of artists. I thought I would, you know, I didn't know them. I didn't know any, you know, I just decided they were going to be in the book. And I like made a huge deal and everybody was kind of like, and like, what else? You know, and then like, I don't know, it just like rattled off some other ideas. Like they thought I was gonna like come up, say a lot of ideas and have a presentation. I just like made up some stuff and I left and I was like, oh, fuck, I messed that up. That's it. Like, now I learned I have to be prepared, whatever. About like 3 weeks later or something, I'm online to like get a marriage license. I'm like with my husband online at like the court, or my soon fiance, to get married. And he's like looking in my eyes, like, I'm so happy we're getting married, whatever. And I get like a missed call on my phone, and I look and I see that it's like a number from San Francisco, and I'm like, oh my God, like. And so I'm like, do you mind if I just like listen to this voicemail? I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I'm so excited. And so I listened to the voicemail, and it's somebody from Chronic Books that says like, I was at the meeting. I really want to work with you. Your book sounds amazing, and we're going to send you a letter, an offer letter, like next week to like talk about your project. And I like go back to my husband. I'm like, so happy to get married. They're like, yes, I'm getting a book. Like secretly. Our marriage didn't last anyway, so that shows you like what I really care about in life. But so that was like, what I want to say is that was a very aha moment, because I realized if you believe in your thing, everyone else is going to believe in it too. So I sat there and I said, this is what I'm going to do, and whether you want to do it or not, like, I'm going to do it. So do you guys want to do this with me? Here I am. Here, we're going to go.
God, I can't top up that story.
Sorry.
Julia.
So
As I'm sure many of you, I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil, basically. So weirdly enough, I studied graphic design because when I was, I think, 7 years old, I asked my older sister if there was a career in which you combine drawing and creativity. And she was like, oh yeah, there's this thing called graphic design. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be a graphic designer at 7-year-old. Then years went by, I started graphic design, and I think it was second or third year that I realized how much I was enjoying illustration and drawing. The issue is that I was already in graphic design, and my parents couldn't afford another career. So what I did was like, okay, if I want to do this, maybe for a living, I'm going to learn how to be an illustrator by myself after class. So I went to my university's library, and I remember there was like, I don't know if you guys remember the Illustration Now books by Taschen. Anyway, it's like a bunch of illustrators, like a catalog of illustrators. And I remember like reading the book cover to cover. I memorized all the names. And then I did my first internship that same year in a newspaper, actually. And I don't know how, but everybody at the newspaper, they heard this thing that I liked to draw, and for one article, I was doing the internship as a graphic designer. So I was doing mock-ups for the pages and articles going the next day. And one of the journalists approached me, and he was like, "Hey, Fran, I heard you're an illustrator. Would you like to illustrate one article that is coming tomorrow about women who go into their boyfriend's Facebook account to see if there have been cheating on them?" And I'm like, yeah, that sounds fun. And I was so nervous. And I read the article, and I'm like, okay. First of all, my boss was really nervous because she knew it was my first proper commission, and this thing was going to go national. Like, all of the newspapers were going to have this illustration, and she was like, okay. And she was like really nervous. Take your time and do the best you can. And I'm like, okay. And I think I showed the sketch to her a million times because she wanted to make sure that everything was going on properly and like nothing bad happened. And I did the illustration. I think I had to take like 1 hour to make everything in total. And the next morning, I remember coming out to the office, and I saw the newspaper printed. And that was my aha moment, my first one, because I realized, like, looking like next to me, the newspaper with my illustration printed, and I realized, holy shit, like, this is so cool. I've never seen anything done by me printed, and I started like shaking like crazy because I realized everybody was going to see that illustration that day, and the next morning was going to be like wrapped in fish and whatever. But I'm like, I'm going to keep this forever. And my mom put it on the fridge. It was amazing. that was my first aha moment. But then I realized, okay, I want to do this for a living, because one thing is to see if you want to do this as a hobby, but then I'm like, okay, maybe I want to do this for a living. It's a totally complete different thing, because when you get feedback from clients, sometimes they can be really harsh and like mean. So then while studying graphic design, I started taking small commissions. And then I was doing, when I graduated, weirdly, I started working as a graphic designer, because I think I was too scared to go full-time as an illustrator. And I think that was my second aha moment, when I was working at this like awful advertising agency, like all the worst experience ever. Like my boss was the worst. And I'm like, I remember that morning going to work crying hysterically, like, I don't want to go to work. Just like I was, I don't know, 13, I don't want to go to school, was the same. And I decided, like, why I'm not doing illustration if this is the thing that I want to do for a living. And then I realized that when you decide to go full on with illustration as a freelancer or working for a company or whatever, I feel like I was so scared to face this, because when you're working part-time because you want to save up to be like eventually an illustrator, it's fine. But I was avoiding to be an illustrator, because if I did this full-time and I fail, it will be the worst. So I'm like, I was in a very safe like stage in which I'm like, no, everything's fine, because I'm not legally an illustrator. So I'm like, no, F this, I'm going to quit my job and double down on illustration. And that was my second aha moment.
Fran, as you were talking about clients and editors, can you talk about what it's like to work with editors, art directors, how collaborative that experience is, when autonomy is useful and when you really benefit from that relationship, or the challenges of it?
I guess we're doing that like down the road thing. So
Do you want me to
do you
go
want to
first?
not go down the
You
road?
go first.
Okay. When is it? I think that probably when an art director gives you trust. I think that that's the best working with people, when they trust you and your decisions. It's really hard when you have to like convince somebody that it should be pink when they think it should be blue, kind of thing. And I think that usually with short deadlines, they trust you because there's no time not to. So if you work for like the Times or somewhere or in the New Yorker or something, it's really fast. And so they just kind of, they're like, okay, they don't really have a lot of changes, which is really nice. But I think a lot of the time a good art director, you get upset when somebody says like, don't do this or change this or whatever, because you're like, oh, like, this is what I thought about and this is what but a lot of the times their suggestions are really good, and you have to kind of step back and be like, okay, like this is not about me and what I think is best, and they are working for this magazine. You have to kind of like also trust them. So I think it's like I don't know if that was a good answer, but yeah. It's hard sometimes, and sometimes it's wonderful and easy.
Different people, different experiences, right?
Yeah.
In kids' books, like you're working intensely with an editor. If you're illustrating somebody else's manuscript, you're working with their text, right? You're working with the editor, you're working with the art director, you're working with the designer, and then later on you're working with, the publicist and everything. So it's, every book, everything that you make is a team effort as it goes. But a lot of it is just you too. So like you said, like when you get feedback and critique, the first time is very hard to figure out how to react to any of this, because you're figuring out how to be in a relationship, right? But the more you are, the more you realize like you have that initial grumpiness and like interior tantrum sometimes of like, why? But then if you let it sit, it can be useful too. So like I've gotten feedback that of course I don't want to do. I want everything to be perfect and, magical and go out, 100% the first time. That'd be amazing. It never happens. But it wouldn't be a good product in the end. It wouldn't be a good story in the end, right? So when I get feedback back from like editors who like really know their shit, and I love reading those notes and be like, oh, like I didn't realize that, or like, oh yeah, you saw what I was trying to do and you found this great way of making it better. And then sometimes you get feedback where you internally rebel a little bit, but it's ultimately useful because like with my second book, Crab Cake, which came out in February, it was really hard to figure out the ending. It's a book that's very odd about despair and environment and crabs and underwater creatures, and I really needed to stick the ending in a way that was satisfying, because otherwise, I think I would doom all these fish to purgatory, and then also it would be a terrible kind of dismount for it. And we went back and forth with the editor about like just trying to figure, and my agent too, just like trying to get to this ending. And one of the things was interesting about working in a relationship where you're getting that kind of feedback is even if so with critique, like even if there's no like answer given by the other person of like, well, this is, you should try A. Eventually you'll come up with C, but like if a person keeps telling you, or if other people keep telling you like, you should try A, you should try A, you should try A, you should try A, it's telling you like, okay, they keep noticing this problem, or they're missing, like, I really think that the answer is C, but they don't, so why? Like, oh, okay, maybe I have to go back to the beginning and change this character and move this around. So you kind of start getting used to screening critique and learning what's useful and what's not, and taking in advice that like the ones that you're excited, and then when it's not, you have to really have an answer as to why it's not, because you can't just...
How do you know when feedback isn't useful?
I mean, I basically trust myself. After I give myself a time to just feel grumpy or whatever about it, when I get back to my desk and I look at the story and I look at the notes, they either make sense or they don't. And if they don't, I need clarification. And if they still don't, then I need to come up with a solution or like a better question, and then I need to back it up. So when I go back to an editor, I'd be like, well, I really think it's C, and here's my like justification. Like, you need to see Lola having fun before she has her accident, or you don't care about her as a character. So you really need to spend this money to make this like really, and that was not an example of something that went wrong with my book. Like, my editor was wonderful, but like that kind of thing. So whenever you have to explain something to people, especially people who may not understand comics, they don't understand how speech bubbles work or the language of certain things, you have to kind of show them. Like I used to do tech theater, and they would say like anytime you have to go to the director and you're telling them stuff about like, oh, you're going to be behind this like flat and this and here, you really have to draw them a picture, because they could absolutely understand what you're saying, but like a lot of times like they might have a completely different picture in your head. So when you come back with feedback, you got to have like, here's why, here's an example, like prepared. That's been helpful. And then if it's wrong, then you maybe just put your foot down and like find out what your rights are from your agent and be like, well, okay, I'm not changing it.
Also, another thing, what you were saying before is like showing more people than yourself. Like if you like get so angry at first, and then you're like, ask somebody else, like a person you trust, and other illustrators or comic people or whatever, and you're like, the art director said this, like, what do you think? How do you think this end is working? They said this, and this is how I think. And like, the more people you ask, you realize like, oh, it's like I'm missing, like I missed the mark here, like they're not getting it, and there's got to be a reason why. Like, so it's just like having a lot of eyes. It's like being in class again at school and like showing a bunch of people and having a crit. And I think that's maybe a way to see if it's useful or not useful. Because if a lot of people are saying like, yeah, that's fine, pink, like that's just like an aesthetic choice that you should be. I gotta. This is terrible that I should tell you this, but one time I was working for a magazine for a while, a regular gig, and all of a sudden the art director said, we don't like how the faces look anymore. Like the faces, there's something about the way you're drawing the faces that's...
Were they specific? Like, we don't like
No,
this.
I said, I don't really understand. And they said, it's coming from high up, so I don't know either. Like, it's not coming from me. And I didn't know what to do, because it's like, this is how I draw the faces. It's like not any different from anything else I've ever drawn. And like, we've been working together for a while. And eventually that job stopped. And I was like, I guess I didn't know how to fix the faces. But it's like, that's how I draw. So that kind of was like a useless one, I think. One example of like a useless critique, because that is like my style and that's how I draw. And if you don't like it, don't hire me for that then.
a useful one is like, the end of the book needs to make sense, so, let's figure that out, I think. Yeah. Like, people aren't getting it.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten advice by people I've worked for. It's always been pretty good in terms of doing my personal projects. Things about my book Theft. My editor I ended it really abruptly, like kind of intentionally, and my editor thought that I was kind of cutting off my nose to spite my face. So I added a page there. There's been little, I like the phrase you use, it's like a conversation between two people. If it's you're in the right business, but some of the things you're talking about isn't really my career model. I don't do magazine work. I support myself almost 100% by teaching, and then when I have any energy I have of my leftover time, I do really personal projects. I'm happy with that. I feel like my own personal work can kind of remain it can remain separate from that. It can retain whatever kind of specific quality, whatever kind of specific vitality that I want it to have for its own sake, without worrying whether it has that vitality because it's going to fit, it's going to help my career. It's going to be something that continues to support me. And in fact, I look at the careers of, like, when I pictured being an artist, I pictured being a guy who makes comics, that gets published, that has readers, and everybody I know that does that only does comics, it seems like, even people who are a lot more successful than I am, it feels like they're badly suffering. It seems like I'm constantly seeing them saying, oh, I'm going to sell some original work. It's the end of the month. I need to make rent, or I need to pay bills, or whatever. So, yeah. So it's a little bit. I feel like I don't really have that competitive gene in that place. The type of gene that makes you go after a certain type of work that gives you visibility, that is with cool magazines. As much as I admire a lot of that work, I just don't have it.
Can I add something? Okay. So I haven't worked with, done a commission in a while. But I remember I related so much to what you said, Andrea. I remember in the beginning when I started having a style and people hire me to draw a certain way. I remember I was such an asshole to clients, because I'm like, this is my color palette, so I only work with pastels. And I remember working with magazines and newspapers, and they were like, Fran, pastels on magazines and newspapers looks horrible. Could you please work with more brighter colors and stuff like that? And I remember in the beginning I was so stubborn, no, because if you're hiring me, you need to stick with my rules. And then I'm like, who am I kidding? I miss so much working with clients because they push you into doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And you generally perform better when someone is pushing you in one direction. And for example, that's how I realized how amazing darker colors are, dark blue. I fell in love with electric blue and way more brighter and intense colors because of that experience. So I realized that clients push you in a way that there's no way you can push yourself, because you're trying to impress someone. Of course, there's ways in like Andrea said, there's no reason, or Julia, I don't like the way you draw your faces. It's okay, there's moments in which there's nothing you can do, but if you can try a new way and experiment with how the client wants you to do things, I think it's a great experience and opportunity to dip your toes in something different, and you will learn so much about that with that experience.
With the last 15, 20 minutes, we could open it up to the audience if there are any questions.
No questions. Come on. That's embarrassing.
You go overwhelmed. guys are first starting out, is there anything, well, that you wish you would have known at the beginning that you know now?
I wish I knew. I guess I learned pretty fast about doing surface design, like selling design or licensing designs for things. I feel like illustrators don't know they can license their work for stuff, for a product, for plates and napkins and shirts and like a product and store in big places, and that it makes a lot of money. And like that is like people never knew that. Like I'm teaching surface design at SVA right now, and like it never existed before I started teaching it. Like people just didn't know. So that's something I think you get to know ahead of time that I didn't get to know.
So what advice would you have for sort of moving in that direction if someone were just starting?
You mean how to get the jobs? How to get the jobs. This is always the question. How do you get a surface design job? The way you get it is putting your work out there and having it be seen the most you can. You guys should all have Instagram accounts, sorry to say, and be making it very professional and trying to get followers and all that, because it's so important right now. It's just so important. It's like how I get all my work right now, which is crazy that is such a thing. But it's like having a portfolio. Nobody looks at websites anymore. They're like looking at your Instagram. So what was the question? Oh, how to, yeah, that is how I think that's the best way. I mean, and also approaching people and sending out your like email, mailer type of thing.
I wish I'd known that there's a lot of people that I thought there was like a lot of mutual hatred between us, and then they ended up like surprising me by like offering me work. And it's like, it's weird sometimes between strangers. It's just like.
Well, give an example of that. What is that?
Oh yeah, like name them by name.
No, I mean like, what do you mean? Like who did, like companies or people, like people?
People, peers, people that I met on the way coming up when I was getting my education. You ever have those conversations with somebody where they're just like so-and-so, so they think that they're so this way and that way, and it starts to sound legitimate, but you can kind of put that coat on everybody. And there were a lot. I remember one time being at a panel and watching this guy talk and just thinking just because I was insecure, just being like, this guy is such a waste of time. And I'm listening to him talk about his work and blah, but just having this narrative going on in my head. But you have to understand, I spent all this time in my 20s. I just was like this, like punk rock, like screw up. And I was I'd walk into restaurants and they'd be like, well, we're closed. Just like I always felt like I was being given the bum's rush. And I would just expected people to dislike me. And a lot. So I went down the list one time. I was thinking so many people who had reached out to me, and I was sure like 80% of them had complete contempt for me. And then because that preemptively, I had contempt for them.
Yeah, generally people are good, I guess, is the lesson, right? And
it?
Generally people are good and kind, and it's hard to think that.
Still going through it. Sometimes you have to send an email to somebody and you're like, this person has never supported me. And then I'm going to reach out to them, but I would love to just like wither them with my complete disregard of their existence. And then you do it, and then it turns out that they don't hate you, and they're cool with you, or they're learning to come to terms with how much they hate you, and they're going to work with you anyways.
That's a good one.
I'm glad you talked about the insecurity, because it's such an impossible position to be new at something, right? Like you don't know what you don't know, and you kind of know that you don't know what you don't know, and you're terrified, and you're trying to make money and survive, and like when you walk into a scene or anything that looks like an industry or anything, it looks like everyone else knows what they're doing. Nobody else knows what the fuck they're doing. I mean, relatively, I know what I'm doing now, kind of, but like, we all have questions. But it looks like it's just you, right? And you feel very small and kind of dumb and indulgent, and like all these like weird moral emotions like come out of everywhere to make you feel crappy, like, oh, I'm indulgent, I am childish, like who am I to think I could actually do that, like all the bad thoughts, like maybe for just me, but like they come out and it just adds this extra weight to you. But like there's, I wish I had been able to sit down with myself when I was younger, which would have been very strange, and just kind of like tell myself to be more open to asking for help. Like, no, like I don't know. I'm going into this cold. I don't know what I want to know. I'm having faith in something I'm not sure is going to work out. That's weird. But I know that I care about this, and I always have. So I'm going to try, and I'm going to have feelings, and I will deal with them, and I have support, and I will take care of myself that way. But like, I love your work. Let me reach out to you. And if you don't get back to me, that's going to be hard. But I'll ask another person. Like, not to give up asking for help that way. Like, I feel this way very strongly now. There are people who are like me who look back and like see people coming up who want to be there for folks to like change the industry around us. So they do exist. So if you reach out to folks, maybe they're like, be respectful of their time and realistic, but like, like if you meet a bunch of jackasses, or if you have some negative experiences, or you're in your head manufacturing those negative experiences, like have faith that there are people who really care about helping you out there, and like just try to take care of the future you. Like reach out to that too, and like be comfortable being like, I'm gonna fuck up, I'm gonna make mistakes. Like I don't know stuff right now, so I can't walk into this room, I can't walk into this convention or this interview or this pitch meeting. I have to like pretend that I know my stuff. Like maybe I do, and maybe I do right now, but like I don't know all of it, and so I'm gonna need to learn it. And I'm gonna need to learn a lot. I'm gonna need to do a lot of work to get there, but I need help in doing that. And that, like having someone explain to you just what paths look like is so useful, right? Because otherwise you're like piecing it together out of internet searches, and that's really confusing. So ask for a lot of help. If you don't get it right away, don't take it personally. Like it's just hard, but like find folks to mentor you in lots of different ways if you can, and like bring allies around you at the same time so all your boats lift together. Because it's weird and it's lonely and like you need support.
Okay, I have a lot of advices, but two that are very important. One, I learned the hard way that most of the things that you want to do, you can do them right away. But I remember I waited so long just to be prepared enough. Like, oh no, I'm not ready. And for example, having an online shop, I'm like, I need to wait for the right moment because I don't know what envelope to use, or I don't know how much to charge for shipping, or which products I want to do. And you learn the hard way that you learn while you're doing it. And I know it's like super Nike, like just do it. But seriously, just jump and you will learn along the way. And the other thing is that most of the times, I don't know if all the time, but most of the times clients will pick you if you look enthusiastic to do a commission or a job. I remember I was applying to do this like huge commission for ALMA. This is like a huge observatory in my home country, Chile. And I remember it was between me and another illustrator. And I went to this interview, and the woman who was interviewing me said, you and her are basically exactly the same in terms of like portfolio and experience, but I want to work with you because you looked interested in and excited and enthusiastic about this job. And I remember like I did research about Alma and like, oh yeah, I learned this on the internet. And she saw me, what a nerd, like went to the interviews super prepared and enthusiastic. And I think when clients and big, I don't know, boss and they own these big companies and they see someone who really wants to work with them, they see like, oh my God, this person, even though they might not have this huge portfolio or they look all the same to me, this person actually wants to work with me. So I feel like if you're interested and enthusiastic and excited about doing something, you have better chances to get a job. So enthusiasm and learn as you go. That's it.
Hello. So I'm actually a photographer, so I'm like surrounded by illustrators. It's so awesome. It's really cool to be here. But my question definitely applies to anyone in the creative field. When you're just starting out or you're at an intermediate level and you're sending a lot of cold emails and just trying to put yourself out there, do you have any advice or
any kind of process that you did when you were just beginning, or did you have a certain way of going about reaching out to clients, potential clients, brands, networking, or like, I want to talk at a panel one day. How do you go about looking into growing?
Yeah, I feel like as an art director who gets 50 pitches a day, I would just say a couple of really simple things. Attach your art to the email. Don't make me click on a link. Don't write to me and ask if you can send me work. Just send me work. Don't write and say, how much do you pay for work before you send me your work. It's absolutely appropriate to negotiate pay rates always, and don't ever feel afraid to do that, but wait until you get the yes to do that. And then know where you're pitching, and know the work, and know why your work is right for them. Those are my main ones.
I can add something. It's so flattering when people write your name on the email, like, hi, Fran. I hate when people, I don't mind when people are sending like a mass email, but take the time to just like customize the email a little bit. No hi there or hi, just like, hi, Fran. I loved your work and so and so and so. It's like, oh, that's amazing. Someone took the time that even though they're reaching out a bunch of people, they took the time to do research on you and what you're doing and why they like your work specifically. So name and a little bit of research. That's at least my take.
I have a small trick that I do. It's not a trick at all, but I always Google image search the people I'm working with to see what they look like, to like, because you're working with like an art director and you like think of them as like a god a little bit, or like somebody who's so important, and when you like look at their picture, you're like, oh, it's just a person, and like you like imagine what their life must be like, and you're like, oh, it's just like they're, so you always write at the end of me, it was so great to work with you, like that was so fun, even if it wasn't fun, because like you think like they're just a person and they just want to feel good too, they want to think they did a good job, and they want to like, I don't know, I imagine you're like when somebody works with you and then they're like, that was so fun, thanks so much for hiring me for that, I had a great time, it feels really good because it's like, oh, I helped somebody feel good, they're a person like you who wants to feel good too, so you're like, when you like Google image and see their picture, you remember they're a person.
If you're making a bunch of work that you want to like get to the next level of, but you're like, well, how until they offer me that next level, how do I get up there? The like self-imposed homework that you guys talked about is huge for that. So you're like, there's a photographer in Philadelphia, Hannah Yoon, who's amazing. She's doing a series right now of portraits of female creatives in Philly, because just want to meet people and do that. But like, that's not an assignment. She's like, I'm doing this. And then she can go to The Guardian, she can go to places and say, like, I do this work because I'm already doing it. And if you want me to do similar, or if I want to like pitch the story to you, I'm already doing it. So before I was making kids books, I would tell stories through comics, or I would make my own picture books through the MFA program or on my own. So like start making the work that you want to be doing. Mm-hmm. So you're already making it, and then you're doing it, and you can pitch that and be like, I do this. This is great.
I feel like people want to be involved with you when you enjoy what you're doing, like you said. And you when I first talked, and I talked about my teaching independent class taking off because I was trying to help somebody else. I feel like in some ways you have to kind of let things come to you. So, do get involved with what you're passionate about, and feel like it blows you up a little bit. I mean, unfortunately, I feel like every time I've overtly gone after something, it's just, seemed to recede. So, but most opportunities I've gotten have been like indirect, like somebody else came to me. And that's not because I'm so great. It's just that it feels like there's some kind of weird magic in the universe that the more you want something, the more it recedes. And so you have to kind of indirectly let those things come to you.
The other thing, sorry, is that you live in New York City or no?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the place where everything is going on. I know for illustration, like Side of Illustrators, going to the American Illustration event, going to this event, like you meet so many people. And if you like meet an art director and you're like making him like a personal connection, impression, they're gonna like remember you when you email them. Hey, I met you at Mocha. I came to your panel. It was so amazing. Here's my work. I wonder if you might think, it's cool or whatever. Like just like making that personal connection too in the world. You being in New York is like you are blessed with that. Most people don't get to do it.
I have one last quick question.
Yeah, just curious. Well, just going back to what you said, Josh, just dealing with other artists, overthinking it. But have you ever dealt with, like, say if you work with the artist or know an artist, you came from the same place, they get a little success, the ego gets to them. How do you deal with that?
Oh yeah, it's like sucks. 'Cause it's like and it's a cycle because you're doing the same thing to somebody else. Usually. Yeah, you just have to kind of imagine how you look, and try to be, when you see somebody starting to kind of stiff arm you or whatever the phrase is, cold shoulder you, I feel like the only thing that would work is like continuing to be nice to them, supportive, not in a needy way, even if you're feeling otherwise. Because when I think about the people who behave badly to that, sometimes you just kind of outgrow people who were your peers when you guys aren't on the same level anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I respect their art, but, respect, the old saying about respect. Respect is earned, respect is given.
Mm-hmm.
And they apparently forgot that, so, I respect their artwork, but I cannot respect their attitude. That was just my question, personal experience.
Bummer. Yeah.
That's not me, is it?
Kill them with kindness. You do the Michelle Obama. Go higher. Like they ignore you. You're like, oh, I'm still here. Like, hey, I don't know. You can't like make somebody be nice, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah.